Hi, everyone. My name is Holly. I'm from LMN. I'm here today with Monica Muir from Muir and Associates. Today, we're going to be talking about how to create a budget in QuickBooks, and then also the benefits of creating a budget in LMN to use as your operating budget. Monica is a QuickBooks Solutions partner. We have a partnership with Monica, and today she's going to walk you through the recommended steps and the reporting options that are available. So I'm going to turn this over to Monica, and Monica, if you want to lead the way, and we'll start off the webinar.
All right, thank you, Holly, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you're able to make time today to take part in our presentation here. So just to kind of give you a heads up on what all we're going to do, we'll talk about benefits of budgeting in QuickBooks. I will discuss both desktop and online, how you can set them up, and the budget reporting that's available in both the products. And then Holly will take over on the benefits of budgeting in LMN, which are awesome, and how to get those set up and some of the benchmarking data that you can get. So if we take a look at some benefits, I find that my larger clients do have budgets. My smaller clients sometimes are on the fence. I relate, but if nothing else, you can think of it as maybe if you don't do anything else, you can at least set some sales goals. And it's just nice to be able to have them in one place where you can see rather than just kind of in your head. But although sales goals are probably the fun ones to work on, you also want to work on what your profit's going to be. And I've got two different profits here. Your gross profits are after your cost of goods, so it's your sales minus all your job costs. And then also taking a look at what's your bottom line, the net profit. So that's after not only your cost of goods, but also all the overhead costs. So you want to maybe have some targets for those. And it also, budgeting can give you some clarity for the business. Where do you want to head? I always like to say you can't see a target you can't see, so it helps to have something in place. It also helps you maybe see a bigger picture, because instead of just focusing on the job, which definitely is important, but it also makes you step back and take a look at the company as a whole, as well as maybe the divisions that make up your company. You can also use it to help you control expenses. So you've got these great sales goals, but you know what? If you want to hit these bottom lines, then you also need to be able to monitor the expenses. And you're a seasonal business, so sometimes it's deciding when you're going to have those expenses, or in some cases, like you're going to have an uptick in your labor costs once you get into the spring season. It can also be if you've got someone that's overseeing a specific division, then it also lets them maybe have some control over, if they want to make a certain goal in terms of a bottom line, then here's how they need to control expenses as well. Let's see, I'm seeing your mouse move. Holly? There we go. All right. So you can also look at how you can measure your performance. So once you've got a budget in place, then during the year you can see how you're doing. Are you on track? You're ahead? You're behind? But you do have a way that you can see that. And this is also very useful then when you want to go set up a budget in LMN, because you can take a lot of the numbers from QuickBooks, and then they'll help you when you're working on setting up the budget over in LMN, which Holly will show you. So this is just a quick look. We'll come back and take a look at this later too, but this just lets you see that you can actually see from month, year to date, and annual. So again, with the idea that you can kind of see here's where we are and here's where we want to head. So again, giving you that target that you want to aim towards, and you can see how you're doing. To get started, a lot of times I recommend just start with your P&L. So definitely look at last year's. Maybe you want to look at the previous year too if you want to look at any trends. And I did collapse some of the accounts. I'm sure you have more accounts than what I have here on the screen. But also notice that it did turn on percent of income and percent of expense. And I think sometimes it's a real eye-opener to see, number one, just, how what is the percent of income that your cost of goods is taking up? And two, I find that if you have some of these percentages, it sometimes is maybe easier to hit to create the numbers that you want going forward. So maybe these are higher than you wanted, they're lower, they're great, but it does give you sometimes, what you need for gross profit in order to get the income that you want. So it does give you some levels there. And two, just kind of seeing, where are your bigger expenses or smaller ones. So I just find that that's useful. It's not written in stone. But again, if you're looking at how do we come up with our new numbers, this may give you some guidelines as far as how you want to project what you're going to do for the upcoming year. So once you've looked at your P&L, then go ahead and decide on what do you want to do for your sales numbers, and what do you expect that your job costs are going to be, and where do you figure your expenses, which would be your overhead, are going to be in order for you to get that new place. Where do you work on them? I would say most of my clients probably do this in Excel, but you might take what you did last year. You can mark your sales up by a certain percentage. Maybe you want to mark some of your expenses down. Maybe you know that in order to increase some of your sales, some of your costs are going to go up as well. So you can use percentages if you want, but that does give you some starting points. And what do you want to do for time periods? You're eventually going to have to do by month. Some folks maybe start with an annual, and maybe you can break it down into quarter if that kind of helps relate into some of your seasonality. But it's up to you on what works for you when you're trying to work on these numbers. So in the desktop version of QuickBooks, once you actually want to create the budget, you'll go up to Company and Planning and Budgeting, and then put in the year. It's hard to believe we're in 2020 already, but you would select Profit and Loss. I'm not sure I know anyone that does the balance sheet, except maybe some of my accounting peers. Yeah, let me see. And then to create the budget, you can do a couple different things. Let me back up one. That you can choose no additional criteria, so you're just going to create your budget kind of based on the P&L format. If I'm not sure I know why someone in the desktop would do it for a customer job, but you certainly can. And if you use your classes to represent the divisions in your company, then you can definitely do a budget that's by class. So you could do it actually by division in your company. And then up to you whether you create it from scratch or whether you want to start with last year's data. If you choose to do from last year, it will actually give it down to the penny, just so you know. So you'll definitely be changing the numbers anyhow, but just so you know what to look for. So up to you what works best for you. So this is what your screen is going to look like. And so it's your chart of accounts on the left. Again, I kind of collapsed a couple things. Sorry about that. Going back too far. So my mouse roller, I apologize. So here you go. So once you come up with, in the desktop version, you are going to have to do by month for the different accounts where you want to have numbers. What you can do is for any given number, if you know that it's going to change, if it's going to be the same amount every month, you can definitely copy across. So an example might be rent. For those of you that have subscription products, I know I do. I've got a few different ones, same amount every month. Those you can just copy across. They become pretty simple. Others are going to definitely vary, especially since you have a seasonal business. So, but you can, when you are working on this, you can decide that, maybe starting in March, that's when some of your numbers may increase. And notice that you can increase by a percentage or a dollar amount. It's up to you. And if you want percent, you actually have to type in the percent sign. Another thing you can do is when you're actually on any given cell in your budget, you can hit what we call an operator. So an operator would be like the asterisk or the slash sign. So asterisk would be if you want to multiply by a certain dollar amount. You want to multiply, say, by 10 or 15%. And the slash would be if you want to divide by a certain dollar amount or percentage. So again, I'm always looking for, I'm impatient on computers, so is there a faster way to get this budget in, because it is fairly time consuming. So a couple ways that you can do that. If you're in QuickBooks Online, then you start with the gear icon, and then you would go down, click on budgeting, and you will see a screen somewhat similar to the desktop. Notice here, again, you pick the name, you pick the time frame, but you do have the option of, is this going to be monthly, quarterly, or yearly? If you select quarterly or yearly, it will actually divide out once you look at your entire year. But again, you do have those options. So you could do something, within a given quarter. If you wanted one quarter different than another, you could do that. Again, whether or not you want to pre-fill the data, and then also taking a look at whether they're going to say subdivide desktops that use criteria. So don't subdivide. You're just kind of looking at like your P&L sort of. If you do it by customer, then you're looking at a specific job. If you are in QuickBooks Online, there is no estimated versus actual report. So if you wanted to do an estimated versus actual, you would create a budget for the customer or sub-customer in this case for you, and then you could have like an estimated versus actual. You can also do class just like you can on the desktop. So again, if class are your different divisions, then you can start it up by class. And then you'll get, you actually have to get through a couple screens before you actually get into creating the budget, but you'll get there. And so here what you'll see is, again, you've got your accounts on the left, you got your months going across the top, and you can copy your numbers across. Unfortunately, you can't mark up or mark down by a percentage like you can in the desktop version, and there is no pop-up calculator in the desktop, in the online version like there is in the desktop. But still, you can get your numbers in, and then you're good to go. In terms of then what reporting you have available, both of these products can give you a profit and loss, budget versus actual. So this is the desktop. Your online is going to be pretty similar. So you've got I did a year-to-date here, so it's got the time period. It has what you budgeted, whether you're over budget or under by dollar amount and percentage. And up to you as far as the columns you see, but again, it just kind of gives you that basic report. A couple things, if you'll notice in there, I did have some red. I'll show you where they came from, but you can decide the columns that you're going to see. So the default for that report would be both dollar difference and percentage. Maybe you want one or the other, up to you. But just so you know, you do have that option. Don't let the word advanced scare you in QuickBooks, truly. So a lot of times it just gives you additional features that you can check out. So here you can actually say in terms of how you want to see your numbers. So if you take a look at the rows and columns, then what you're going to see active, well, let me start with non-zero, means that it has to be something other than a zero. It can be a minus 1 cent or a plus 1 cent, but it's not zero. All says it's going to be all your numbers, whether they're zero or not. Active says that you had transactions in that account, but the net amount could be zero, might not. And you can do that both on a row basis and a column basis. So when you're looking at reports, I know for me a lot of times I'll do non-zero because I don't care to see zeros. Maybe you do, but you do have that option. Another thing that you can do is you can actually change how you see your numbers. The two things here I'll highlight in red is how you want to see your negative numbers. So the default in QuickBooks is going to give you a minus there, but you can choose, which is what I did in that one report, to make them bright red so they stand out. The other thing you can do is when you're looking at your numbers, QuickBooks will just give you dollars and cents. And I think most people that I see when I see their reports, that's what they've done. But you can choose that maybe you just want to see, you don't need to see the cents. They're insignificant in the scheme of things, so you just want to see that. So up to you, but just wanted you to know that you have a couple of choices when you're looking at your budgets that sometimes make it easier to see. So again, the budget and loss, profit and loss budget performance is desktop only. But here you see, and obviously this is the sample company file. It's the sample product one called Rock Castle. So they didn't do a budget on a monthly basis, as you can tell here, but you would see, here's my numbers for my actual numbers for this month. Here's what we budgeted. Here's what we've done year to date. Here's what we budgeted and the annual budget. But again, with the idea that here's where we are and here's where we want to go, how are we doing? So that I think to be able to see the big picture and kind of where you are can be very helpful in a company. A couple other reports that you can see, again, when you're in the desktop, you can do a budget report by class. And that's available in the desktop only. Unfortunately, they don't have it in QuickBooks Online yet. So here's what it would look like. You could have your classes as your columns. and then your accounts would be on the left. How that might look, you can see that I've got class 1, and then I've got the time frame and budget, whether I'm over or under budget, and then the next class. So that's one way. So they show you the class with your different amounts, and for each class that you've got. Another way that you can look at this is if we take a look at, you can do class by month. I can't say I warmed up to this personally, but it might work for you. So your months would go across and your classes would be your rows. And so this would be what it could look like. So again, you have the budget information, but you'll see your classes for each one. So kind of up to you of whether or not that, which way you want to see it, but I know some of you do budgets by division. So just so you know that you can get the reporting for there as well. So just kind of a recap, we looked at some of the benefits of budgeting in QuickBooks and how you can set them up both in the desktop and online version, and then some of the reporting that's available in QuickBooks for the budgeting on there. And then we'll get into, Holly will take care of the benchmarking and LMN. And then just real quickly, so in terms, I am an elite QuickBooks solution provider, so you can go, you can either email me at the link that you see down here, or give a call, or you can go to this website, either one. But just so you know that as an elite QuickBooks solution provider, you actually do get the lowest available pricing from Intuit. That's always good to know. In some cases, we can give you lifetime discounts. And whether you're looking at online or desktop, that's true. And for those of you in desktop, if you are in 2017, you will need to upgrade before the end of May. Otherwise, software will still work, parts of it won't. Intuit only supports 3 years. So my recommendation is to do something before you get into your busy season. And then obviously you can reach out to LMN and find out more about how you can tap into their really good software. And I'll let Holly take it over from here.
Great, thanks so much, Monica. Also important to mention here, if you're considering changing your QuickBooks subscription, so if you use online and you're interested in upgrading or changing to desktop for that job costing availability, you can certainly contact Monica as well. Okay, so thank you, Monica, for walking us through how and why to create a financial budget. I will now walk the group through using an LMN operating budget. The first slide that we're looking at is showing an operating budget as it differs from your financial budget, as Monica just walked you through. Displayed on this screen, you will see that there's 10 tabs on the left side to create your operating budget. Step 1, budget info, includes a work breakdown by 4 categories. LMN conducted studies in North America based on these categories on profitable companies whose sales percentages are similar to your company. Upon entering your company's work breakdown by percentage, your numbers will be compared against industry averages for labor, equipment, materials, and subs. These industry averages are to be used as a guideline and benchmark to compare your data against. On the top right corner of the screen, we are looking at tab 10. You will see your budget revenue per man hour. So that's right here. The revenue per man hour is unique to your business based on the data you entered in the tabs prior and your company's individual unbillable percentage. When we refer the revenue per man hour on a job, it's including the total selling price, labor, materials, equipment, subs, overhead, and profit, divided by the total number of hours estimated. You will see in a few slides how this budget revenue per man hour is used to analyze your profitability on an estimate. The second tab, tab 9, is where you will select one of our 3 overhead recovery methods. As a default, LMN has pre-selected our preferred, which is multiple overhead recovery, also known as MORS. This method of overhead recovery recovers your overhead through all the items that you sell. So your labor, your equipment, your materials, and your subs, placing a heavier burden on the items that require more overhead, such as labor. Once your operating budget has been activated, the next step is establishing your item catalog. The item catalog is like a SKU list of products you sell, broken into 5 tabs. The item catalog provides confidence and consistency with pricing. It enables the company to clearly identify their break-even price prior to earning a profit. With each item in the catalog, your overhead recovery method and percentage, plus your profit margin from the budget, will be applied to all the items that you sell. You also have the option to use the profit margin from the budget or set a custom profit margin or custom price. Now we're looking at an LMN estimate. The budget continues to come into play, calculating the cost, break-even price, and total price of the estimate while recovering your costs and overhead using the items outlined in your item catalog. Lastly, we are looking at the Estimate Analysis tab. Once again, your operating budget is back in action. As you can see down below, LMN is comparing your estimate profitability against your budget. To the right, LMN is comparing your budget revenue per man-hour against your estimate revenue per man-hour. Your estimate revenue per man-hour will vary by estimate and type of work. Design, build, construction type jobs tend to drive a higher revenue per man-hour than service type jobs. It's important to keep an average, as the revenue per man-hour is an indicator whether you are in line to achieve your sales goal. If you're always higher than your budget revenue per man-hour, you will achieve your sales goal faster, versus if you always fall below your budget revenue per man-hour. Well, that's it for Monica and my presentation today. I wanted to thank you all for attending. We would also like to ask if should the audience have any questions for myself or for Monica. If you can please write your questions in the GoToWebinar box under chat. If you've minimized the webinar box, you can just simply click the arrow button to expand it, where you'll be able to see that chat window. When you're asking a question, if you could clarify specifically whether it's for LMN or for Monica, we will try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. While we are waiting for questions to come in, I will switch over to the next slide. For new users interested in our product, you're able to sign up for an LMN free account and create a budget. The free version of our software provides you with access to create a budget, build out your item catalog, and test out our estimating prior to making a commitment to our software. So you can go at your own pace. For new or existing users, we just released a new training module called the Academy Online. Whether you are looking to create your first budget or you're an existing LMNer looking to update your budget, the Academy Online can provide you with step-by-step specific instruction on best practices and provide supporting resources. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, skip to the next slide, and we'll just give it a few moments to see if any questions are coming in. Okay, I do have a few questions that we have received prior to this webinar. Commonly asked questions amongst users for QuickBooks or users for LMN. Some of those questions are targeted towards LMN versus QuickBooks. I'm just going to lead with Monica. I have a question for you. Does QuickBooks have a list of recommended budget reports that can be run weekly, monthly, etc., to compare against your budget?
They don't have a list per se, but they do have, it depends on which QuickBooks you're in, whether you're an online or desktop. but they do have probably, I think the desktop has maybe 3 budget reports that you can customize. QuickBooks Online may have 1. I think they just have the budget versus actual, but you can customize that to, you know, either based on by class or by time period that you can do. So I'd say as far as some standards, that's probably most of my clients might do a budget versus actual, and I do see the performance report in the desktop, but both of them will run, in both versions, they typically will run the budget versus actual.
Great. The next question that I have is for LMN as well as QuickBooks. I'll start with you, Monica. Do you recommend updating your budget, your financial budget throughout the year?
It depends on who you ask, is what I found. My husband actually is a retired CFO from a hospital, and he's like, you set the budget and that's it. He said for the year, and then you just, if there's changes, if you get these changes in expenses or revenue, they just are comments that you make. Now, of course, he had to present to a board. I spoke to a peer who used to be a CFO for a company before he went off on his own, and he said he used to do one for, like after about 6 months, he might do a 6-month adjustment to the budget. So there's not a right or wrong. It really kind of depends on who you ask. So it's up to you. It's your budget. Yeah, kind of up to you. If you're looking at, trying to maybe hit some goals or achieve some things, then you might want to think twice about what you do adjust. But obviously, if you know that, you get the rent increase, or, you get subscription increases during the year, they're going to go up, maybe those you do want to adjust. It's entirely up to you.
Okay. Thank you so much for the clarification there. And we follow the same kind of practice. Every company is different. What we recommend, if there's been a drastic change in your business, whether you won a large contract or you lost a big contract, you may want to adjust your budget as you have those wins and losses throughout your business. When you do adjust your budget in LMN, we always recommend making a copy of your budget versus editing the original. You can create as many budgets as you would like. Creating or revising your original budget can also be used so you're able to compare what it would look like and how it would affect your profit, or what sales that you would need to increase should you want to expand your business, whether that be purchasing newer equipment, bringing in a new crew, changing your scope of work. So if you're wanting to build your business more in a particular division of your budget, there's many reasons why you perhaps may want to adjust your budget throughout the year, just to play with those numbers to see overall how they'll affect your profit margin and overhead. Okay, so it looks like I have a couple of questions here. I have a question here, and it's asking, if we are syncing LMN and QBO, is it necessary to create an annual budget in both programs? So I will take that question, and the answer to that is that I would say yes. So they're two separate budgets. Your financial budget is different than your operating budget. Your financial budget would be hitting your P&L. It's where you're submitting all your expenses against. I'll let Monica expand on that. Versus your LMN budget is your operating budget to ensure when you go out to price your work, you're recovering all your costs, your overhead, and earning that desired net profit. Monica, did you want to elaborate on whether or not it would be beneficial to have both?
I absolutely agree, because I do find there are some differences as far as what you have. I do see there's a lot more detail from the job portion of your business when you're in LMN, which is the purpose of LMN, right? But when you're over in QuickBooks, you're looking at your company as a whole, and you've got all your overhead. So you don't usually have all the detail of your overhead in LMN. Obviously, you need to cover your overhead in your estimates. But as far as all the actual detail, a lot of times that's better left just over in QuickBooks. As far as so you would want them both, because they're going to kind of give you two different ways of looking at your business, and they both work in conjunction with each other.
Okay, thanks, Monica. I have another question for you, and the user is asking, We would like to raise our previous numbers by 10% through the entire company through QuickBooks. Is there an easy way to do this?
So if you're on the budget, what you do have, there is that option in the desktop, not in QuickBooks Online. The desktop, you do have the option to take any given number and then just multiply it by 10% when you're working on the budget. So there was that one screenshot that we had where you had an option where you could adjust your numbers as you go along the way. So that's one thing. The other way is obviously if you did it in Excel and then you looked at bringing the numbers back into QuickBooks.
Got it. Awesome. I have another user for a question for QuickBooks as to if we're using an LMN operating budget, what is the point of having a QuickBooks budget?
So the QuickBooks budget is taking a look at your business as a whole. And the LMN budget, although it summarize that information, when you're looking at your actual payroll numbers are going to be over in QuickBooks. Your actual overhead expenses are going to be in QuickBooks. So if you're trying to see your business as a whole, you're seeing your jobs when you're in LMN, and obviously you're trying to hit certain targets to be profitable. But when you're over in QuickBooks, that's where you actually get to see, just how profitable are you. And so the budget is really trying to help you see, here's what we were looking towards, and here's where we are overall. And if you're off one way or the other, either better or not, you get the detail in where it was in the overhead portion that you might not really have so much of that detail over in LMN.
Great. And we have another question that's for LMN, and the question is, do we have training modules on budgeting in the Academy Online? The answer to that is yes. I would recommend accessing the Academy Online. It's academy.golmn.com. Should you have any questions about registering for Academy Online, please don't hesitate to reach out to our support desk. You can reach out to us via live chat or send an email into support@golmn.com. We absolutely have training on the budget. It's broken out into very short videos on specific areas of the budget to walk the user through either updating or creating a new budget from start. And let me just see what other questions I have here. Just a moment. Another question was regarding the Academy Online, whether or not it's included for existing subscribers, and the answer is yes, it is. It's included for new and existing subscribers. To access, please go to academy.golmn.com. If you're unsure what your username or password is, just click Forgot Password. If for whatever reason you have an issue registering for an account, again, please reach out to our team here. I have a question, Monica, about job costing in QuickBooks Online. Are you able to compare budget to actuals in QuickBooks Online, estimated versus actual?
So in QuickBooks Online, there is no estimated versus actual report. So LMN is able to sync the estimate over, but when you enter your actual data in QuickBooks Online, there is no estimated versus actual. If you want to see an estimated versus actual, then you would create a budget for that job or sub-customer, and then you can get a budget versus actual. And typically what you'll find, one of the differences between the budget and say an estimated versus actual, the budget's going to deal with your chart of accounts, and the budgets, at least especially in the desktop, use your items in QuickBooks Online, like be your products and services. So you estimated, your labor, materials, that kind of thing. If you had more detail in there and they were your products and services, you see that in the desktop. But in the online version, you'd have to actually create a separate budget specific for that project that you're working on. And
Gotcha.
it would be in online, it would actually be the sub-customer and not the project, because the project field is not available in the API yet.
Got it. And Monica, a question from me. Do you have a lot of users that are switching over from online to desktop for job costing?
I do. I mean, I would say I do move clients off of QuickBooks Online. I mean, it's always up to you, but the biggest reason is when it gets to the job costing, the labor. And I find that materials and subs and equipment are maybe a little bit easier to estimate, and your actual hours for the job, that tends to be more of a gray area, but you don't get the labor costing over in QuickBooks Online that you do in the desktop. So if they're serious about trying to get some of those job costs and some additional reporting, then I do find we do move them back into the desktop.
Okay. And is the desktop, would it be on a server? Is that quite expensive to do, or is that more flexible these days?
It really depends on the number of users you have, what you need in terms of remote access. So a lot of my clients actually do have a server in-house. So they move from being online into a server in-house. There are several different hosting options. So if you really want the remote access, then you can certainly go with a hosting company. I find clients do that, and then I do have some clients that you can actually buy your own server. It's different for a remote desktop, but you could have that, and again, you would be able to remote in. You're not going to see the desktop QuickBooks on your phone, which like you can with QBO, but in terms of having remote access and functionality, there definitely are a lot of ways that you can do that. Just depends on I actually have a kind of like a standard email now, because I get a lot of clients asking about remote access with QuickBooks. So there are different ways that you can go if that's really important to you. And then you can certainly reach out, and I'll be happy to share that with you. And I think I shared it with Holly too, so you can get some of that information from her too.
That's great. I have two questions for LMN. If we update our budget now and deactivate the old budget, last year's, it will only affect new estimates, correct? Older estimates will still be based on the old budget. That is correct. So when you make a change to your budget, so you update your budget for the next fiscal year, it's not going to affect your pre-estimated work. It's only going to affect new estimates that you create using this new budget. You do want to make sure that when you are deactivating, when you create a new budget, and that you set it as the standard default or service default, I would recommend deactivating or archiving budgets that are no longer in use to avoid confusion or someone accidentally selecting the incorrect budget. I have a question from a user regarding the Academy Online. They're asking if the sign-in credentials are the same ones that they would use to log in for LMN estimating or LMN time, and they are not. So I believe the username is actually your email, which is registered through LMN, and then the password would be unique. So upon registering for your account with Academy Online, you would need to reset that password. Then I have another user that's asking about what would the recommended upgrade be. I believe that would be for LMN. They're using LMN free currently, and as some of our users may already know who have used LMN free and then upgraded to basic or pro, we do have those 3 packages available right now. LMN free is designed to be an introduction to our software so that you're able to get familiar with it, put your numbers in, move along through the software, build an estimate before making a financial commitment. So to this particular user, I would recommend that you contact our sales team, sales@golmn.com. they'd be able to make a precise recommendation based on your business needs on which subscription would probably be best for you. The two packages that we do have, or three packages, is LMN Free, then we have LMN Basic, which is budgeting and estimating and time tracking, and then LMN Pro, which is budget estimating and time tracking. It also includes invoicing as well as photo and file storage. I have a question. It's about QuickBooks Online. Why doesn't QuickBooks Online pull labor costs from QuickBooks payroll into project costs summary? Monica, would you have do you have any insight as to why it might bring this report into the summary?
I guess I have to get clarity on the question. So if you're using QuickBooks Online Payroll right now with QBO, the payroll is in essence outside of the software, but right now all they'll do is you will bring it in. They won't get into the specifics. They've made a couple, they're looking at making some changes. So I've seen some of the, possibles of like what's maybe coming down the pike, but right now it's not there. It's been the job costing actually job costing for QBO has been on the roadmap for a long time, and it's just taking them a very long time to get some of those pieces in place.
Yep.
So they aren't going to pull that all in.
Yep. And I know from an API standpoint that our developers are constantly checking for any updates as to when that API will be released. So LMN's able to connect to projects or connect to the pay items, which are now available in QuickBooks Online. Unfortunately, it's just it's a waiting, and it seems to be taking a little bit longer than anticipated. I have another question for LMN. How much should the adjustment line affect the final budget numbers? If the info we put in is accurate, should we really be adjusting? Great question. The adjustment line, for those of you who may not be familiar with the adjustment line that we recommend in LMN, should you want to increase your profit margin, it's used if you're at a negative profit margin or if you're at a profit margin that's less desirable than what you would like to aim for. The profit margin is defaulted through your items in your item catalog to use the profit margin from budget unless you specify to set a custom price or a custom profit margin. So why you might enter a specific adjustment line is one, if your profit margin after you outline your sales, your costs, and your your cost of goods sold and your expenses, some companies are left with a lower than desirable profit margin. So we would manipulate our system to add an adjustment line in order to increase your profit percentage. We're manipulating the overall numbers just in the sales. In order to increase your profit margin, you're still going to sell the same amount of work, but instead of bidding up your work by 2%, by default, we're going to bid it up by 10%. For more information about that, you can visit our help desk. It's available within your LMN account under Get Help. Select Help Desk, and then you can search, I believe it would be under Adjustment Line. I have another user that has asked, just a moment here. Question for LMN, what is the recommended way to invoice? We're currently invoicing through QuickBooks Online. What is the advantage of invoicing through LMN? Great question. The advantage of invoicing through LMN, particularly would be for your hourly or your per visit, per occurrence, or billable material work. LMN captures that once it's set up within the job and tracked by your foreman in the field. So from their activity on their timesheet, you're able to review and approve and sync an invoice to QuickBooks for that type of work in an instance versus going through piles and piles and piles of paperwork or paper timesheets to find out what the true time on site was, what the materials were used, etc. It's all driven from the timesheet. Once that timesheet is submitted, you have an opportunity to review and then send it over to QuickBooks. So straight out the gate, we handle that incredibly well. In addition, we can also handle your per season contract, so your monthly billing, and I know QuickBooks does as well. You certainly wouldn't need to do both. If you're already using memorized transactions in QuickBooks, I would recommend maybe consider using LMN in the future, because what you can also do is for those per season contracts, they're just going to run every the 1st of the month or the 15th of the month, depending on what date you select. You'll have your invoices sitting there waiting for you. The other benefit is that if you have services that are hourly or billable extras, you do have the option to either add that to your monthly invoice, or should you wish to invoice that separately. So there's quite a bit of flexibility there. I have a user asking, what are the industry averages included in LMN pulled from? So that's under the work breakdown under the first tab, budget info. And that work area breakdown, there was studies conducted throughout North America where we pulled on those specific categories in order to calculate profitable businesses with the same similar sales and percentages as your companies. I have another user asking for LMN. And just a moment. They're currently estimating through QuickBooks Online. What is the difference through LMN? So the difference with LMN and what we how we started initially over 10 years ago is that our software was developed for the need of our former landscape company. We created this system for budgeting and estimating where we're recovering our overhead, knowing what our costs, and we're able to price with confidence. So when you're using your operating budget in LMN, you've outlined all your cost of goods sold as well as your expenses. You can see what that desired profit margin is and price your work accurately, consistently, and confidently. Monica, did you have anything to add about estimating in QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop?
Oh, I would say there's no comparison. For a lot of my clients, even if they put an estimate in QuickBooks, they've done the work in Excel. So I just think with all the features that you have in place to help them build the estimate and to be able to capture, recover overhead, I just think that'd be QuickBooks hands down. So I'm just very happy that it syncs over, so it doesn't always have to get recreated over in QuickBooks.
Yep. I have another question for LMN. We currently have LMN free. Should we upgrade later? Do we have to start from scratch? And the answer is no. So the data that you're entering into your LMN free account, once you upgrade to whether that be basic or pro, that information, you are working in your upgraded account. So you would be working in your live account. You wouldn't lose access to that information that you've inputted. I have another question for LMN. What is the second type of overhead recovery available in addition to Muir's? I believe this user is referring to the field labor overhead recovery. It's typically recommended for maintenance, and it's used to recover overhead through maintenance because you wouldn't have as much equipment, you'd have very little materials, potentially subs, that you wouldn't be able to recover your overhead through those means, primarily only your field labor. So businesses that are either 100% maintenance or create divisional budgets, tend to use the field labor overhead recovery for those service maintenance type work. And I have a question from a user from Ground Skies that is looking to access the Academy. For that particular user, I will contact you after the webinar today, and I'll provide you a little bit of instruction once I learn more. And I think I've gotten to all the questions that I have here. Let me just have a little review. Okay, I just have a couple more questions that just came in. So the first question is, how long does it take the average company, 1 million gross revenue, to get up to speed with LMN, training, implementing data, etc.? So every company is different. Some companies are able to adopt and get up and running with the software, and they have an understanding of software and the terminology, and are reaching out to our team for support, booking calls with their assigned rep to have those check-ins to make sure that they're getting off to the right start. With that said, I would allow, I think, a really good setup time for $1 million revenue company would be maybe 3 weeks to a month per module. With that said, every company is different. We have companies that take 6 months to get one side of the software set up. And it doesn't mean that they're not getting use out of the software. Perhaps their focus upon initial rollout was just using the CRM. They needed a way to sort their leads and track communication. So they're going to just be using the CRM, and then they're going to create a budget, start building their item catalog, and get into estimating. So it definitely depends on what your priorities are within your business. I wouldn't suggest, and I think companies may not succeed if they have an expectation to get the entire software up and running in a short period of time. I think that's a lot to put on yourself. I would just take it in stride, focus on a module that you would like to learn, utilize the resources that are available to you that come with your subscription to our software, so we're able to assist and get you set on the right track. And I also wanted to highlight, as I didn't mention, but it's still relevant, we do have a new program called FastTrack. The FastTrack program is where we would take your information, we would submit a package to you where you would fill out all your company's data. From there, we would input it into the account for you and host a few training sessions. For more information about FastTrack, I will, if you're interested, please contact us at support@golmn.com, and we'll be able to put you in contact with the FastTrack team for pricing. And I have a couple more questions. I have another user that has asked, they missed the majority of the webinar, and they're asking whether or not it will be available online later. And to answer your question, yes, it will. Another question about invoicing for LMN and QuickBooks Online. If we do invoicing through LMN, what options do customers have to pay? Currently through QBO, customers are able to transfer money from their bank to ours with no extra fee. So to answer your question, it would be the same. So when you're creating the invoice in LMN, We're syncing it over to QuickBooks where you're performing your final invoicing and emailing or mailing the client the invoice as you normally would. So you would have all those options still available to you. I got a question, I believe this is for QuickBooks. Can we create a budget in any QuickBooks version, Pro, Premier, Enterprise, or is it only in Enterprise? What are the benefits between Enterprise and Premier?
So that's a twofold question. First, yes, you can create a budget in Pro, Premier, and Enterprise, and also QuickBooks for Mac. So all the desktop ones, you definitely can. In terms of differences between Premier and Enterprise, a couple things, actually several things, but one is certainly the number of users. Enterprises can scale higher. The permissions are huge as far as the differences. So you can actually give people restrict access to certain reports. When you get into Enterprise, there is support that's included with QuickBooks Enterprise. And if you are running payroll in-house in desktop QuickBooks, a lot of times I'll check with my clients, see how many employees you have, how often do you pay. Sometimes I have found that actually QuickBooks Enterprise Gold actually costs less than QuickBooks Pro and Premier plus your payroll subscription. So it just depends on what the current payroll plan that you have, and then the Enterprise customers actually get better rates than the Pro Premier customers do too. So I'm always happy to do a product review. There's no question, doesn't cost you anything. We just look to see, what plan are you currently on with Intuit, because if they come out with a new plan, they don't come out and let you know that they made any changes, but that's something we can find out and let you know if there's something better available for you. And I do have charts that actually give you a few more differences as far as the differences in the software. Enterprise also has 2 more job cost reports. It does have a WIP summary as work in process, but that tends to be more 5% completion. But they also have a committed cost report. And what I like about the committed cost report is if you're doing payroll in QuickBooks and if you've got the time in, from for the week or a couple weeks, but you haven't paid your employees yet, the committed cost will show you a couple things. You're using purchase orders, it'll show you what you've ordered, but you don't have the bills in yet. And then it'll also show you unpaid wages. So the hours are in because you do payroll in QuickBooks and knows what the rate is for their wages. And then it's giving you a cost there. So it says, here's your estimated, here's your estimate, here's your actual cost, here's you're committed to paying for what you've ordered and obviously for your payroll. And then so here's your anticipated cost for the project. So it's an interesting way to look at things.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I have another question from the same user. Do you recommend QuickBooks Enterprise for small landscaping companies under 600K in revenue?
It depends really on, I always get back to, it depends on the number of employees, if it's, and the number of users that you have. I do find those two things a lot of times will drive whether or not Enterprise is, would be useful for you. And it can be as simple as just run the numbers. Premier, at least with Premier and Enterprise, you can get a contractor's edition, so you pick up additional job cost reports. The WIP summary and committed costs are unique to Enterprise, but most of my landscapers don't use the WIP report, and it depends on your business whether or not the committed costs would be useful. So it just depends on how often you pay, what's your current payroll plan, how many people need access, how much do you need to be able to restrict access, and if you're accepting credit cards through Intuit. A lot of times I had one client that actually saved, I think they processed a lot, but they actually saved about $1,700 a month because they were on the old plan and got moved into the Enterprise rate. So it's always worth looking. You never know. You don't ask, you don't find out, right? So be happy if you wanted to reach out to me later. I'll be happy to kind of run numbers for you and see and give you a comparison of the products.
Great. And Monica, do you know offhand if you can export your data from QuickBooks Online to import into QuickBooks Desktop, whether that be Pro, Premier, or Enterprise?
So yes, you can have what they'll do is they'll have you go through like an export interview, and then they'll create a backup file that you can then import into the desktop version of QuickBooks. So two things. Number one, if you decide to go that route, do not cancel your QuickBooks Online subscription until you're happy with everything being set up in the desktop. And when you're converting, whether you're going from desktop to online or vice versa, there will be, quite often, there are a few snags. You hate to say, but want to be upfront. You probably need to allow a little bit of time. But especially in QuickBooks Online, you don't want to have that subscription stop. You want to be able to access reports to make sure you've got the numbers, that everything came in, and you're good to go when you move into and you can take off the desktop, and then you can cancel your subscription. But yeah, they do have a file that they'll create, and then we can import that into QuickBooks and take a look at it. So
great. And we'll just give it another minute to see if additional questions come in before we conclude the webinar. While we're waiting to see if additional questions come in, I just wanted to thank everyone again for attending. Thank you for your great questions. And big thank you to Monica for making the time, and I'm sure your busy day to meet with us at LMN and educate us on what's available with QuickBooks.
I'm happy to take part, and I'm always happy to kind of hear what you guys have to say too. So good.
Great. So we'll just wait about 30 more seconds to see if we have any final questions. And if not, I'm going to conclude the webinar.
I will throw one more thing out there.
Sure.
If you do create budgets in Excel, you can import a budget from Excel into QuickBooks. There's a right desktop. There's a right and a wrong. I would export a budget out of the desktop first, so you get the programming language that needs to go with it, but then you can import into the desktop. You cannot do that with QuickBooks Online. I don't think you can import a budget that you did just for one class. It would have to be for the company, but that is an option for you.
Okay, so thanks again to everyone for joining our webinar today. I hope you all have a really great day. For follow-up resources, please access the Academy online. You can reach out to our support team as well. Our email is support@golmn.com. And Monica, did you just want to provide what your direct email is, should anyone have questions for you?
You can direct it to my actual email account, which would be monica.muir@muirassociates.com. And Muir is M as in Mary, U-I-R, kind of like Muir Woods, out in California. So monica.muir@muirassociates.com, and just abbreviated associates.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, I hope everyone has a great day. Take care. Thanks for joining.